I thought we'd start actually by reviewing the assignment in case there are any questions. So here we are on Blackboard. And if we go to course content and assignments. So here it is. So the first thing I'm specifying is to identify a news article. In the past, there's been confusion about that, so I want to be very clear about what I mean. So here's an example of an article from the journal Pediatrics. Does anyone want to guess, is this a news article?
No.
No.
No, why not?
It cites doctors who did doctors and MPHs who did research, and it's from a reputable journalist. It's reputable from an institution.
It is reputable, that's true, I hope so. But it is not journalism. So it's not news. As you said, it's researchers publishing their research. Additionally, even if it was news, if we scroll down and look at it a little bit, deaths in children and adolescents associated with COVID-19 and MIS-C in the United States. So it's talking about the characteristics of the thankfully relatively small number of children in the US who have died from COVID. So 112 patients, mean age 17 years. You have the demographic breakdown. And notably 86% had at least one underlying condition predisposing them to being more vulnerable to the effects of the disease. And so we have a conclusion section here, right? Associated deaths among persons under 21 occurred predominantly in Black and Hispanic persons, male people, older adolescents with common underlying conditions being obesity, asthma, developmental disorders. So even if this was a news article, a journalist reporting on the news, would this be a good choice for the assignment? And why or why not?
No, because there doesn't appear to be an intervention that they're talking about.
Exactly, right? So where does this fall on the triangle?
Education.
Well, I mean, we're being educated with information in the academic sense, but how about in the freedom triangle sense?
It
No.
doesn't.
It doesn't.
Right, it doesn't.
It doesn't fall in the triangle. It's just research.
We've collected data. That's all we've done. We academics are just collecting data, business as usual, collecting data, reporting the data to our peers in these peer-reviewed publications, data, no intervention. There's a whole separate field of sort of blended research that we call translational research, which attempts to bridge that very gap, right? All of these data, all these studies that we've published around the world for hundreds of years, what's the point? Why don't we make a concerted effort to turn the ideas, the knowledge, into actions, interventions? But this is not an example of that because it's only reporting on the prevalence of the disease. It's just information. And the difference between that and education and counseling is that there's no recommendation to any person to do anything. All it is just reporting data. So that's just to clarify that aspect. And let's go back to the instructions. So identifying a news article, and in the asterisk here, if you're unsure for any reason, send the thing you're thinking about to Pranjali and me. So again, news does not mean, it means it's not a research paper, and journalism means the journalist is reporting on a current event in a newspaper, magazine. An online format is fine. If it's a video, that's okay, as long as it's reputable journalism. The other stipulation I have here is that it should not be about obesity, because we already covered that in the quiz. So choose some other topic in public health, somewhere in the world. And it's even okay if you choose a historical news article, right? When I say news, you think, current events, but it's okay if you choose, to report on the first intervention for, smallpox in 18 whatever or something like that. That's fine. It'd be interesting to read. But I think you get the point, right? So not research, not a journal publishing peer-reviewed research, a news source with a journalist reporting on some current event at the time it was written. All right, so that's a pediatrics journal. Here is a news article. This would be acceptable. This is contemporary. How to feed the hungry while helping struggling restaurants survive. A New Jersey program that partners nonprofit organizations with restaurants is helping people and small businesses stay afloat during the pandemic. Now, you haven't read this article. I'm just presenting it to you here for the first time. Any guesses as to where this might fall in the triangle? You don't have enough information to say for sure, but what are some candidates you might have in mind already?
Probably changing the context to make individual default decisions better.
So tell me why that might be one of the choices.
It might be one of the choices because they're feeding the hungry. They're feeding like the poor, like to make sure they have food and stuff.
So what does that have to do with changing the context, though? Does it matter who's being served? Like it could be hungry people or not hungry people. Does that make a difference for changing the context?
I think because they are also like showing by the New York Times that people may able to see that we should feed the hungry people, or giving an idea of what should we do with those restaurant leftover food to
Okay. So
can
how does
that
this
way.
relate to changing the context?
so that other people can like read the whole thing, and they might thought of like, if I am running a restaurant, so I might think that what should I do with leftover food, so why not I just let those hungry people to eat it, because I just read it. So I think maybe that way it may impact the mindset of other people.
So I think I see where you're headed with that thought. Let's reframe the question then. What characterizes changing the context? What defines changing the context?
That you have to actively like opt out of it.
Okay, right? So it's a default. It's a default for whom?
For like us, like the public.
Everybody, or at
Mhm.
least the entire population under consideration. Right. So don't get confused by whether it's like charity work or it seems like good or bad work. Irrelevant. Who is being served? Is it one person at a time or an entire population at a time? And Aileen, you mentioned opt out. So that's a characteristic of it serving an entire population. Because if you opt out, that's the only way to avoid whatever the intervention is. So if this ever gets confusing, let's go back to another resource we have. I hope that some of you have looked at it if you're confused about how to use the triangle. So if we go to course content, we have our Frieden public health impact model specific stuff here. So this is just sort of a written description of the same things we've talked about. And here's our algorithm. So let's go back to this feeding the hungry example, and let's find out a little bit more so we can clarify where it might fall. And I'll point you to the relevant points here. So far, 34 million has been awarded to 29 organizations in the state to partner with restaurants and meal delivery services. So 29, what we might call community-based organizations, probably things like food pantries. They have money from the state to partner with food producing services, and they're doing something with it. So let's ask again, why do you think this might fit certain category? And we still don't know exactly where it does fit, but what are some of the thoughts you have?
It has a socioeconomic component to it.
Okay, and that's what Vanessa was thinking too. Afra or Vanessa, do you want to share what your thinking was about why it might fit in there, or what would it take to fit in that category?
It's using money to be equitable to everybody.
Okay, and Vanessa, what was your thought?
I was thinking that it's addressing a particular population and kind of redistributing capita.
Keyword, capital, yeah. So it might be just providing, food. And in this sense, food, if you have free food, that reduces your costs. So it is a functional increase in financial capital, absolutely. So the question we have left though is, well, how is this happening? It's not that the state has awarded 34 million to everybody in New Jersey. They're doing it through this channel. And these programs, these companies have mechanisms for delivering services. So we have to find out a little bit more about that. So let's see. So they're going to these restaurants, these small businesses. So that's a nice thought, but we don't know how that maps to the triangle. So they're going to serve 3.5 million meals by the end of January. So this is one example. One of the organizations, one of the team ups, Made Meals and Coalition for Food and Health Equity. They got 1.2 million to serve weekly meals to around 400 people who are eligible for its meal subscription service. Okay. Now, what does that tell us about where it could map to the triangle?
Clinical, because of the repeated nature of subscriptions.
So that's definitely a candidate. What else might be a candidate?
Long lasting.
Important. So why?
Because you just sign up once and then it keeps coming.
Right. So we really have to know the details here, right? So dig in to be very specific about why you're saying that an intervention maps to a particular tier. And now I'm going back to the algorithm that I posted in the chat so we can walk through it and see how it works. So 1, does the intervention have to be done person by person, or does it affect a population all at once? Now, from what we know from the article, what do you think?
Population all at once.
Why do you say that?
It doesn't specify like person to person. It just specifies population.
So let's go back to the word subscription service. So are you automatically subscribed to the New York Times, for example?
No. Oh, sorry. It's person to person.
So that suggests that it's person by person, right? If there's some act of subscribing to a service, that strongly implies that this is an individual by individual basis.
Oh, subscription is individual.
Right.
What the person wants.
So we're going to say for number 1 in the algorithm, it's person by person. So it's going to be one of the top 3 tiers. We've already eliminated change the context and socioeconomic. So let's go to number 2. Is the intervention only providing information, or is there an action?
Action.
Action. Long lasting.
I hear action. So yeah. What would be an example of only providing information?
Maybe like raising awareness of that there is a subscription service available.
Right. So if someone's handing out flyers on the street saying, hey, sign up for this food subscription service, that's providing information. That's education and counseling. Are you hungry? Sign up for this service. It's on you to do it. I'm just providing the information. So we're going to agree that,
I was
Yep.
confused about that. Sorry.
no problem. That's why we're walking through it. So if it only information, you've already got your answer. It's counseling and education. But we're saying it's action. There's an action involved implicitly in this intervention. So it's going to be clinical or long lasting. That word subscription strongly implies that you do something once and get repeated service. So does the action have to be repeated again and again with no predetermined endpoint? Or does it happen once? And so if we say it's once, which I think is probably the best fit from what we know, then it's long lasting. Now, there's a nuance here. Let's say that it's a subscription service in terms of some broad sense of eligibility. You're eligible to be in the program for this food, but maybe it does require going to a drop-off spot or going to a soup kitchen, right? That would be a clinical intervention because you have to do something every time that you want the intervention provided, right? So it's really important to be specific about what the intervention is so that you can map it accurately. So I hope that clarifies some things about using the triangle. So use this algorithm. That's what it's for. All right, so that's the feeding the hungry thing. Just a couple more examples. All right, so this is from BBC News. Now, first, does it fit the category of, is it a news source? Yes, it's news. It's not publishing research. Is it reputable in some sense? What do you think? We hope so. We hope BBC News is reputable. Okay, now let's look at the article itself. Big rise in obesity. What's the problem with that?
Doesn't really mention a intervention.
So already you're wondering, is there an intervention involved? But even if there is an intervention involved, what's wrong with this topic?
It doesn't give any evidence.
Well, what's wrong with the topic itself?
You told us not to do obesity.
Don't use obesity, right? We've already done it for the Frieden quiz. All right, but now getting to your point, Eliza, is there an intervention or not? So pandemic sees big rise in obese children in England. That headline suggests no. So we have 10% of children, now it's up to 14, rose from 21 to 25% in this population, 28 to 40, right? So it's just providing these numbers. So absolutely, there's no intervention here. It's just reporting data. So this would not be a good example. There's nothing being done about this. It's sort of just saying like, here's more bad news in the world. See you later, right? There's nothing. There's no connection to action. All right, and then the last one we're going to look at, we're still at BBC News, but here they have video, reports, video articles. So that's okay to have a video article. It's also written up as well, so we can still look at it. Here's an article about Uyghur women fighting to keep their culture alive. Now, I'm not going to make you read through this in detail, but, and they only have the brief review of it. They don't have the entire article. Anyway, she has 2 restaurants devoted to Uyghur cuisine. If you're not familiar, the Uyghur are ethnic minority population in China who are being persecuted. Every month she holds events there to celebrate the food, music, and dance of her people to ensure the preservation of their culture. This is not quite a public health topic, so it wouldn't be quite on target. But if you really wanted to do something like this, you could dig in here and where might it possibly fall if you had enough information in terms of what tier of the triangle.
I mean, you could argue like education and that it's just, or kind of spreading awareness about.
Okay. Yep. That's a great starting point. And then what happens when a message, an educational message, becomes ubiquitous?
Changing the context.
You change a social norm, which then can change the context for the population. So you don't have enough information to say like, where's the line you're going to draw? If she's reaching like a dozen people, is that really changing context? Or is she reaching hundreds of people in a pretty tight community, right? Is she reaching a critical mass of people for whatever she's trying to accomplish? So again, you just have to be very specific about your justification. What is the intervention? Define it exactly, and then give a justification for why you're putting it on that tier. And if you use the algorithm, it can help you a lot to sort of find the right place. There are some interventions that you could argue in a couple ways. Be very clear about why you're choosing the tier that you choose. And if you understand the definitions of the tiers, it shouldn't be a problem.